Bob.
All
right, Bob, your turn.
You have to unmute,
You're
Bob.
muted. You're muted.
So I want to thank everyone for showing up tonight for this important discussion. And hopefully we can do some things this year that will ease some suffering. If, of course, we can't ease it all, but maybe we can do something to ease some suffering. And that's what we're after. And so wherever you are, or whatever you're doing, make a pledge that we're here to help others. All right, Wally.
Oh, you want me to
Just
talk about
Wally,
dues?
just to take a minute or two to give us the treasurer's report.
Sure, absolutely. The balance at the end of the year of December 31st, 2023 was in our account is $1,369. We had expenditures of $87.60 in the month of December, which were the stamps to send out all the letters that were signed at the at our party, at our holiday party. In addition, I began collecting dues for 2024 at that party, and we have 9 individuals or couples that paid up their dues already. So we had $150 added to our account at that time. And just to remind you, we have decided not to continue to have a post office box. And so you may mail membership dues to me at the address I will put in the chat, which is my home address. Dues for membership in our local club are $20 a year. A couple we give a break to at $30 a year, and students $15 a year. And then you could just mail me that, and as I said, I will put that in the chat now.
Thank you, Wally. Thank you so much. And I want to welcome you all for attending our monthly meeting, the first meeting for 2024. Our speaker, our wonderful speaker is tonight is Nabila Mansour. Nabila has spent the last several years working to improve political awareness in underrepresented communities. She is currently the Executive Director of Rise AAPI. AAPI is Asian American Pacific Islanders, a civic engagement organization committed to uniting, organizing, and supporting the progressive AAPI community in Texas. Nabila is also the president of Asian American Democrats of Texas and president of the Texas Multicultural Advocacy Coalition. She is past executive director of Engaged Texas chapter and led ECI, which stands for an Empowering Communities Initiative, 2022 census initiative to ensure a full count of Houston's AAPI population. Nabila has spent much of her professional and personal life in activating the citizenship across different groups of people. She has a background in community organizing, leadership development, and strategic planning. She holds a law degree from University of Houston Law Center. The topic of her talk tonight is From Legislation to Intolerance. Senate Bill 147 and anti-AAPI hate crimes in Texas. So please join me in welcoming Nabila Mansour. Thank you. Go ahead, sis.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that intro, Muhammad. I see a lot of familiar faces here. Ruzzy, nice to see you or see your name, but knowing you're there. And then Nikki, and I'm going to ask Nikki to join in actually as I'm speaking. She was very much involved in the fight against SB 147, this fight that we were talking about today. And you know, one of the things when you're doing this work, we live in Texas. And we live in Texas and we're used to not winning. We're used to, you know, putting up a fight and pushing and oftentimes not getting what it is we're hoping for. But in this particular instance, I think it's safe to say that we actually were able to get exactly what we were hoping for and really became an example to other states around the country. Oftentimes what you'll see in Texas is you'll see some crazy, insane idea come into play, and then it gets picked up by some folks in our Texas legislative body, and then that idea will just replicate itself all across the country. We seem to be the cradle of all of the bad ideas that happen here in America. Look at abortion, some of our immigration laws. And then this was really meant to be another one of those. This was meant to be a discriminatory, racist law that was to be put into place and then copycatted all across the country. And so what was important for the Asian community, and I think this speaks to us as Asian Americans, is that we saw this, understood the importance of it and the seriousness of it, and were able to galvanize very quickly to really put an end to it. And so a lot of folks were involved in that fight. Gage and Nilofer were very much involved. The Asian community came out in a big way. And so I just wanted to take a little bit of time to explain to you kind of what that fight was and why it was so important that we nipped it in the bud, if you will. So I'm going to share my screen and see if this works. Okay. All right. So like Mohammed said, the title of this presentation is From Legislation to Intolerance, SB 147, and the AAPI Hate Crimes in Texas. Ever since COVID, what we've seen is a real uptick in the targeting of the Asian American community. And it came from really the top down. If you will remember, we heard President Trump refer to COVID as the China virus, the Kung flu virus, you know, just very discriminatory, derogatory way of speaking about COVID. And what happened was you saw a 200% increase in the amount of hate crimes that happened against Asian Americans. Unfortunately, in this country, we have a real history of discriminating against Asian Americans and other, of course, communities as well. Of course, this nation was built on slavery. But also the racism that has perpetuated throughout against Asian Americans goes back all the way to the 1800s. And there were many alien land laws that passed in states all across the country that would bar Asian people from owning any land. And of course, 1882, we saw the infamous Chinese Exclusion Act. The Chinese were actually barred from even immigrating into the country. And that law didn't get repealed till World War II. The California alien land laws, California had a bunch of them, was not overturned until 1952 by the Supreme Court.
Just
and
Nabila,
much like, yes.
we don't see your charts.
Oh, you don't?
No.
Huh. Thought y'all were seeing it. I'm sorry. Let me try again.
Look at your share function there.
Yeah, let me try again. I thought it was showing it.
Yeah, it worked for them
Yeah,
here.
but-
There
oh,
you
there
go.
we go.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
There you
All
go.
right. So,
cool.
there we go. We got it working. So like I said, we had these alien land laws kind of popping up all around the country in the 1800s, all the way through the 1900s. And Texas in particular had a lot of land laws that it passed that were really quite racist and discriminatory against Asian Americans. They would often be called Chinese Exclusion Acts, but the folks that were actually being targeted were really more often than not Japanese. And if you'll remember the Japanese internment camps. And so this is a part of our history. And, you know, it's almost like that strain continues today. And just when you think that it's over, it's not, and it comes back in some insidious ways. And so these are really a progenitor for what happened in the Texas state legislative body, I guess last year, 2023. So what happened? Well, in February, Senator Lois Kolkhorst introduced a bill. And this bill, what it said was, it was basically denying folks citizens from 4 different countries. And those 4 different countries were Iran, China, North Korea, and Russia from purchasing or acquiring title to any property in the state. So what would this mean? This would mean that folks who were here on a green card visa could not open a nail salon. They're here completely legally. They're following the immigration process. They want to start a small business, but it would deny them the right to open any kind of small business on their own land. And this was really, especially at a time when we were seeing increased microscope on these communities, to have them being highlighted like this was really quite remarkable, and really not the way we wanted Texas to move. There was a lot of work being done on the sidelines in order to persuade our lawmakers to let them know that this is unacceptable. And so we saw a galvanizing of Asian American support in a way that we have never seen before. And it was really quite heartening. Folks who had never, ever gotten involved politically were now all of a sudden showing up at their state senator offices saying that you cannot do this. On March 2nd, and I actually drove with Nilofer from Houston, and we went with a colleague of ours, drove to Austin in order to testify in front of the state Senate, talking about why this was so wrong and unconstitutional. And it was really quite amazing. Nilofer, did you want to share something? I mean, you were there. We saw kind of the atmosphere there. There were so many people who were trying to sign up. There wasn't enough time. The hearings took all day. I would love to invite Nilofer to just kind of talk about it, because I know she was there as well on that day, and it was amazing to see.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Nabila. Nabila was also amazing. She always gives great testimony in the unfortunately many circumstances where we have to go to Austin or write in testimony testifying against something, because it's usually trying to stop something bad from happening instead of being able to advocate for good things in Texas. I think what was amazing about that day is that we had, I think, a day's notice. They gave the hearing they held was in the Senate, and the Senate, first of all, I think doesn't have a process for accepting written testimony electronically. You have to like physically hand in your copy, and that was a problem for a lot of people. So a few of us like were printing out the copies of testimony that the community like wrote in a very short time frame. And we also Anvila and our colleague and I kind of last minute, just drove up to Austin and stayed there the whole day. But it was very heartening too, because a lot of the people who testified had never testified before. Even some of the people who were there were even children there to speak about their experience as Americans. And I think that that level of public interest on short notice really took the lawmakers aback and led to one of a similar law that was, I think, SB 711, that was also being heard at the same time. Shortly after that hearing, the author of that bill just kind of decided not to pursue it based on pressure that included the public pressure. So I think it really illustrates that as part of a strategy to defeat these things, public participation, like always, matters.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nilüfer. She's absolutely right. People were testifying in different languages. People were testifying about their own personal experience. People were crying. We had, I think it really did take them by surprise that there was so much vehement action against it. We had a lot of help with Representative Jean Wu, who is from District 137 out here in Houston. He really took the lead and really made his office kind of like the home base for all of us as we tried to kind of figure out how to do this. And so it was really amazing. But Senator Lois Kolkhorst really kept up. She did not give up at that time. She made a few changes to the law such that it wasn't, she watered down the law a little bit. So it wasn't just any real property. It was now going to be focused only on agricultural property because that was a national security threat. Many of us said that, look, it's not the job of the state government to be making sure that agricultural land is not being taken up by the Chinese government. That is the national prerogative to make sure that they're doing that. We have systems in place. And so a lot of meetings were set up. A lot of written, letters were written, emails were written. And by the end of May, what we saw was that SB 147 did not come to fruition. As you'll remember, this past legislative session, there was not just one legislative session. Our Governor Abbott really wanted to pass some school voucher bills. So he kept calling folks back to session. And I think we had 4 sessions, or I don't even remember now, but there were a bunch of them. It just would not finish. It was the never-ending legislative session. And Senator Lois Kolkhorst brought back SB 147 as SB 51. And so as activists were trying to kind of figure out how we, really deal with this, I think past SB 147, we landed on as a strategy to not really make a big deal of it because she really was not getting the support that she initially got when she first put out SB 147. We were keeping an eye on it. We were certainly making sure that it wasn't gaining any traction, but we also didn't want it to become a big deal. We didn't want it to become kind of like the school voucher issue or the borders bill, and then all of a sudden have one party galvanize behind it and try to get a win. So we took a lower profile after that first one, and we are happy to say that SB 147 or SB 51 or all of its other copycat legislative bills did not pass. Unfortunately, which is often the case, what we did find was that once Texas passed, or at least put it out into the ether, if you will, we saw some imitation bills pop up in other states. And what we see now is that 8 states have enacted alien land laws, much like SB 147. So you saw them pass in Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Indiana, Louisiana, Montana, Tennessee, and Virginia. Many of us talked to activists from these other states, talking to them about how we were able to push through and make sure that this didn't pass here in Texas. And even though they passed, what I will say is the organizing that was done on the ground was able to really water down the bills much more than what their original discriminatory intent was. Because of this bill and because of kind of some lobbying that was done on the federal stage, it was also looking like that this might pass on the federal level through the Rounds Amendment, which was included in the Senate version of the fiscal year 2024 National Defense Authorization Act. And so many Asian American groups worked with their partners over there in the Senate to make sure that it did not pass, and it didn't actually. So that was a surprise. We all kind of thought that maybe it would pass on the federal level. We had some real champions here on the ground. One of them is our own Congressman Al Green, really worked hard to make sure that on the federal level, he was making sure that he was talking to folks to make sure that it wouldn't pass. This is just a timeline. It started in February. They were hoping to just kind of quickly and quietly pass it through, but we were able to work and make sure that they know that this was not acceptable. I wanted to just highlight one thing. We've seen this happen where communities of color, minority communities are singled out. And the reason why it is so dangerous is because there are some real life repercussions of it. And we saw that in a really horrific way on May 6th in Allen, Texas. There was a shooting at a mall, and of that shooting, 4 of the 8 people that were targeted and killed were of Asian descent. We have really, I think Engage has as well, many other activists have tried to argue that this was a hate crime and pushed the law enforcement out in Allen, Texas to investigate it as a hate crime. That has not been heard. It put a real chill in terms of, the community, because this shooter had a real history of racist remarks and some really horrible diatribes he had posted on Facebook. And we know that this area, Allen, Texas, one of the largest growing AAPI, Asian American areas in Texas. And so it was really horrific. We're seeing still the consequences of what happens when the rhetoric that comes from the top is of a discriminatory matter. And so one of the jobs of my work at Rise AAPI, we are a 501c4, and we work to typically engage the Asian American community, but also work to advocate for the Asian American community. And one of the things that we're really taking seriously is this rise in anti-Asian hate, and working with all other groups to make sure that we can tamp down and not get elected officials that kind of wallow in this type of rhetoric. And so we're going to continue to do that. I'm going to share my phone number as well as my email. And I'm happy to take questions about SB 147, which I think we should celebrate our wins, and I'm going to celebrate this as a win. So thank you, everyone. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nabila. That was just wonderfully. I mean, I remember I did not go to Austin, but I did sign these petitions, and I helped publicize, not just me, but a lot of folks here in the Clear Lake area publicized this activity, which was and all that hard work that you guys put in. We saw the results of that hard work. So thank you, and thank you, Nilofer, for leading this effort, in our state, which is such an uphill battle for a lot of issues. So now, so for you folks, you can ask a question. Just unmute yourself, ask your question, and mute yourself back, and we'll just open the floor now. Just go ahead and do it. Who has the first question?
Bob has his hand up.
Okay, Bob.
He was full.
I'd like to know, when you were testifying before the legislature, what were some of the arguments they were using against you when you were testifying?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, China is considered a real foreign security threat. And there was this idea that Chinese are buying up agricultural land in order to, take control of whatever, our food supply or what have you. When in reality, China owns less than 1% of all the foreign-owned agricultural land in the country. So this was kind of the excuse that was given, that we are under a greater threat by China and we need to shore up all of our resources to make sure that some nefarious forces do not come and start buying up land here in America. That was one reason why we said, well, if it's agricultural land, then why is no one, if you're worried about agricultural land, then why is this a ban on all real property? And so they did, Senator Kolkhorst did take that suggestion. We, of course, believe that even that agricultural land was problematic because we just don't see that threat as being a really real threat. And it could be used in a really discriminatory fashion against people from Iran and China. And Nilofer, I think you can speak about this because I know Nilofer is from Iran, or her parents are from Iran. Didn't they have, like, if you were a green card holder and you were a citizen of Iran, you would not be able to hold property. And I remember there was some, in Iran, if your father is Iranian, you're automatically an Iranian citizen. And so there was, all these question marks up in the air as to, could a person who was born and raised or have U.S. citizenship and by descent have Iranian citizenship, would they not be able to have whole land? So the language of the law was so badly written and had so many unanswered questions that it was really another thing that was really problematic to us and raised a lot of flags.
Okay, thank you.
Who had the next question?
If I,
Ruth?
okay. You laid out pretty well the things that led to success and the things that you focused on in getting this bill shot down. I'm just thinking to myself, are there things that you learned in this fight that could maybe transfer over to other anti-minority legislation? And if so, what's that? What would your advice be?
I think that's a great question, Ruth. One of the things that came out of it is we started an organization called the Texas Multicultural Advocacy Coalition. And it's a coalition of Asian American groups, African American groups, and Latino groups. And what we did was we said, look, we need your help. We need your help to fight this because we can't do it on our own. So Asian Americans make up 5% of the Texas population, but a lot of the state legislators came from rural areas that don't have a lot of Asian Americans. And so while we could certainly show up in really heavy AAPI areas and cause a fuss and a stink, we couldn't do that in those rural areas. And so we looked to our friends in other areas and we said, and we had a conversation with them. And we said, look, this stuff is going to happen over and over again here in Texas. We saw at that time, I remember HISD was up, like they were trying to take over, and they have taken over the school board. But at that time, we were talking about HISD, and then of course the borders bill that passed very recently, the Show Me Your Papers bill, if you will, and we said we really need to start coming together and helping each other and fighting with one voice against some of these, I would argue, civil rights attacks that are coming from the top of the state. And so this organization was formed, the Texas Multicultural Advocacy Coalition. We have the NAACP, we have Latin American organization LULAC, Rise, and many other Asian American organizations. And we're working with Congressman Al Green in particular to make sure that we're at the forefront of fighting for these issues that affect minorities, because we know that we're stronger together and that we have a greater voice when we do it. And we do it before they pass. Now, some of that, we're not always successful. I mean, right now there's a really atrocious law that says that if you are driving and a police law enforcement officer thinks that there is someone who is illegal in your vehicle or what have you, they can question them and basically racially profile them and also get you in trouble because you're doing the driving. So I mean, there's some really weird stuff that's coming out, and it's important that we work together. I think one of the things, the other thing we learned is that activism works. So Asian Americans, we are a community that has been historically the type of community that keeps their head down and keeps working, doesn't want to rock the boat, is just very grateful to be here. And let's just keep doing our own thing and stay out of, everybody's hair, and there will be no problems. If we don't say anything, then they'll leave us alone. And what we've found is that's not the case. If we do that, then they won't leave us alone. They will attack us. They will bring in laws that discriminate against us. We have to speak up. It is our right to speak up. And if we don't speak up, then our voice is going to be lost, and we will lose out on many important civil rights that are important to us. So I think that was really important. We had a march in Chinatown where we shut down the street, and it was filled with Asian Americans as they were walking down Chinatown, saying that this is not going to happen, not under our watch. And we reached out to all of the elected officials, all of those folks that came to us for votes, that came to us we're in the midst of primaries right now, and are saying that they want our vote. Well, we have to hold them accountable. And one way you hold them accountable is say, hey, you got our vote last time. What is it you're going to do in the now to make sure that this doesn't happen to our community? So it was a number of different things, a couple of different things. I think one of the main one was that being quiet, putting your head down and just doing your work is not enough. We have to speak up for ourselves.
All right, who's next?
Can I say something?
Yeah, Julie, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My representative is actually Al Green, and he's a really good guy. But sometimes, like when these actions come up and we contact, like I contact my representative, and I know he already supports this, I feel like I'm just preaching to the converted, preaching to the church, so to speak. If our representatives are already on board with these actions, who else can we contact?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, this was a state action. And so Congressman Al Green certainly helped use his influence and lended his voice to this movement. But our state reps and our state senators, and we have a whole list of elected officials that we can reach out to. And I think making sure that your voice is heard to your state representative and your state senator, because this had to pass the Senate before it made it to the House. And that's exactly what happened. A lot of people started calling their state senators and saying that you can't do this, not under our watch. And they backed down. We had the original, it was looking like this was going to pass, and we were tracking this bill. And there were quite a few Democratic, it was a bipartisan bill. It wasn't just going to be passed by one party. But the pressure campaign started, and we let them know that, look, we're watching this. And here's another thing about state legislation. These state legislators don't know everything about everything, right? They get a bazillion bills coming, and they usually have an area of expertise on one or two areas. Someone's expertise might be on infrastructure. Someone else's expertise might be on something else. And so they have all these pieces of legislation that comes in front of them, and they're not an expert. Those really, if they're going to pass it or not pass it, is based on their first reading, and then whatever the legislator who actually put it together told them. And Senator Lois Kolkhorst is very well respected within the Senate body. And so people kind of just believed her on exactly what she said and didn't really do any of the due diligence that they should have, until someone came and gave them the education on what would actually happen if this piece of legislation passed. And that's when we saw the votes turning.
Okay.
Their hands up.
This attendee with the Samsung phone said, do you have a question? I saw a hand raised from there.
I've got 2 questions. Are
Oh.
most of the state legislators from just, what percentage of them are from rural versus what you would call suburban or urban districts?
So the Senate has, and then I'm going to look to you, Nikki, for help on this, but the Senate has 31 senators. And so they're, a majority of them, I would say, are rural. And I'm sorry, I'll have to look it up, Howard. I don't know off the top of my head.
No,
In the state, that's the state Senate. In the state House, you would see more of a representation from some of the big cities and the suburbs. And yeah, this was an issue that was not really on anyone's radar. No one felt very strongly about it. There are a couple of issues where it's very hard to move voters. Gun violence, abortion. You're not gonna, there's a guy who believes in abortion, me coming in and telling him like, you can't, or whatever, or the other way around, you're not gonna change. But this was an issue where folks didn't know, and there was an opportunity for education. So less than this kind of the rural, urban divide, it was really more of the, do you know what this bill is about or do you not? And no one really had a strong opinion. It didn't kind of fall within those neat kind of culture war issues, if you will. And I think that's why we had success in being able to convince our state bodies to not vote for it.
I had two suggestions on your presentation. Take what you want and leave the rest. The whole pattern that you talk about, you're talking mostly race and minorities, since the 1860s. But there's an article on the web, and you can find it in anything, called New York's Bloodiest Week. And it's about the draft riots during the Civil War, in which the Irish population rose against the draft and started lynching massive numbers of black people in the streets. And the article shows that the game that you're seeing played between Asians and whites and all of this sort of thing, this was played between the Irish and the Italians and the Norse and the Thames right up until the Civil War. So the game is not just a racial game, it's a political, one group versus the other game. And I think if you included that in your presentations, you might get around some of the racism that you're dealing with. If people could see this is a problem that transcends race, it's been in the country for a long time. The other thing is, when you mentioned the Asian Exclusion Act, most people don't know, but the Chinese were particularly courageous in doing the Western Pacific Railroad and dealing with the dynamite and the mining. And they thought that this would be just, put their gateway in there. But in turn, it roused the and opposition of white laborers, which the politicians then jumped on the bandwagon on. So when you're talking to that community, if you're saying you think just being passive or sacrificing your lives is going to get you, we've been down that trail, it don't work. And that's it. But I really think that to get beyond thinking of this as race, going back and looking at New York's Bloodiest Week and the background in there would be a great help to you. Enough said. Appreciate your patience with me.
May I just interrupt for 1 second? Except this is
Nikki, you have-
about, sorry, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is about race,
Go
so
ahead.
that's why it was, but Nilafar had her hand up.
Oh, thanks. I can't remember which question I had now, but about the rural versus urban districts, I would say that it's a little bit difficult because, especially in the Senate, I just put a link to the composition of Senator Colcourt's district. She's the one who proposed and was pushing for SB 147. She represents part of Fort Bend, which has a lot of Asian Americans, but then she also represents the full amount of a lot of rural counties. So I think, and her home base is like Brenham. So I would say it's a little bit hard to attack legislators as primarily being like rural versus more suburban or urban. And when it comes down to it, it might just be that, this is seen as an issue that wouldn't have electoral consequences for the people pushing for it. And when they encountered bipartisan backlash, because Asian Americans don't vote as a monolith, a lot of Asian Americans vote Republican. that level of bipartisan backlash was what made a difference. But I will also, like, after this, like, I think it's a good idea to maybe look into rural versus urban and why certain types of legislation come from certain senators a lot. But I wouldn't say it's like the defining factor. My question for Nabila was in a lot of Texas districts, the primary kind of decides who the winner of the election is. And we also often, I was going to ask if, based on your like years and years of expertise, do you think there's more racially inflammatory language in primaries versus generals? And what opportunities for advocacy do you see there?
Yeah, so we're going through the primary season right now, and what you see, I think, is the extremes of either party. So you'll see, because the folks that come out to vote in the primaries are really the true believers, if you will. And the true believers tend to be more aligned with the fringes. So in the Democratic primaries, you'll see folks try to lean more into their Democratic bona fides. So like you'll see like more lefty talk, and then the primaries in the conservative side, you'll see more right wing. And so those are open to kind of, I think we can say that they are more open to kind of playing to the prejudices that are at play in the community. And then what often happens is when you get to the general, they more pivot to a central message because they're trying to get to a wider voter base. I mean, that's historically been the case, but we've seen an upending of that sometimes in the Trump years, I would argue. So because so few people vote in the primaries, and the people that vote tend to be the real ideologues of their community, you do tend to see kind of an exaggeration of whatever the positions are of the party. And so that's why it's always kind of like general, like moderate politicians are always worried that they're going to have a primary opponent that's going to come and just be this kind of really crazy person and might actually make it through, because the moderate, regular folks tend to not vote. And it's really low turnout vote elections for the primaries. And so folks that have an outsized position tend to have also an outsized influence in terms of the election results. So I don't know if that answered your question, but it was really, you do see a lot of these issues get racialized because of that.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for Nabila or Nilofer?
Will you be sharing information on actions we can take? If you could pass them on to Mohammed and he could share them with the group?
Yeah, so right now there isn't really much we can do. We do think that this issue is going to come back up, but the next legislative session is going to be in 2025. And so, at that time, we will definitely be sharing with y'all, like, if this comes up again, we want to make sure that we're able to quash it before it becomes a bigger issue. But for now, we want to keep a low profile. We don't want to make a big deal of it. We don't want to kind of celebrate it too loudly, because then it might become an issue that some people can hold on to, or make it into a culture war issue, if you will. And we want to kind of avoid this and keep it under the radar.
Nabila, I'm talking other states which have copied and imitated this law. What's going on with those states? Are there folks who are learning from what you guys did here and fighting against those, or have the laws been passed?
So there's one in Ohio that is up for, it's happening right now. Florida, we did a couple of sessions where we talked to activists over there and tried to tell them exactly what it is we did here, and give them advice. Louisiana, we worked with some activists over there. Now those laws have already passed there, legislative body, so they are, they are the law. But what we can say is that because of a constant push, those laws were watered down because of some of the activism that we talked to them about, and gave them talking points and told them, like, look, this is what worked with us, this is what worked better, this is what people listen to, and to hear, receive well more than this. And so in that sense, it was helpful.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions? All right, okay. Hey, so Nabila, thank you so much for a wonderful, wonderful presentation. If you can share the presentation, we will share it with our members. You can send me a PDF of the file. That will be a big help. And to all the members here, our chapter, like we did last year, our chapter is going to be joining the MLK parade next Monday. Okay. Now, the great news is we are going to be part of Harris County Precinct 2 Commissioner Adrian Garcia's group. So instead of being near the tail end of the parade, we will be right there in the front. Okay. So those of you who want to join us, and I really encourage you to join us, what we have is a special deal for you. We will have Amnesty International t-shirts at a reduced price of only $9.99. If you show up there, we'll sell you that shirt for $9.99, and you can join our group and walk with us on next Monday. I will send out the details as soon as Commissioner Garcia's office gives us the details of what time and what location that they want us to meet us. Okay, Bob, do you have anything to add?
Yes, another added incentive is that Muhammad is going to be our majorette, and he's going to be doing the splits out there. So you got to come to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, see that.
Ruth is going to pay to see it.
And by the way, our next monthly meeting will be on February 5th, same time, same Zoom link, and Bob is working really, really hard to get a speaker.
Yeah, I am. And I was hoping to hear from those folks today. Yeah, you're right. February 5th. I was thinking it's February 4th,
Yeah.
February 5th. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
There's Sister Khawla just reminded us there is an event on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and she put the details on how to sign up for this. It's an educational webinar seminar at Rice University, and the Eventbrite registration link is in the chat, and also I will also share it with the chapter membership with the flyer and the Eventbrite either tonight or tomorrow morning. And this is really a wonderful opportunity for all of us to learn the history of this conflict. Okay. I thought I had somebody's hand up. No? All right. Well, go Michigan. I understand Michigan is leading 7-3. So
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
So-
Thank you, Roger.
You're welcome.
Until it's over.
By the
Yeah,
way,
that's right.
Roger, I have a question for you. Have you
Yes.
did this little in-house deal here? Have you selected the speaker or what we're going to do at band next
Yeah,
meeting?
it's going to be the Air Alliances. Air Alliances is going to be participating, be a speaker for next week.
All right, good enough. I was going to call
Okay,
you Dana.
guys. Nabila, thank you so much. Nikki, Nilofer, thank you, and everybody else. Rosie, thank you. All the way from Space Center Boulevard.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for putting on such a good program. I think
Yeah,
we
Mohammed.
already stated
Yeah.
one we were.
And
Thank
it's
you.
been recorded, so we will share the recording in our next email blast.
14-3 now. All right.
Go Michigan.